So, for some of you, you might not know that parable very well, but for many who have been part of a church for any length of time will have heard this parable many times. It is perhaps arguably Jesus' most well-known parable in the Bible. And I'm sure over the years we will have heard different interpretations. I'm not sure what happened there. I'm not that short, but pretty short. Over the years, I'm sure we will have heard lots of different interpretations drawn from this passage. If I had more time, I would encourage you to chat with the person next to you about what stood out to you from that passage that Richard read. But you'll be glad to know we don't. So when I was reading through this passage in preparation, I tried to focus on some of the words that were repeated in the text or stood out. Do. In the passage, Jesus tells the expert in the law that he should do something a few times. He says, do this and you will live, and then go and do likewise. That the word do is used here when Jesus explains what the next steps must be for the expert of the law. It's really important that this word is used. Jesus doesn't say, go and think likewise. Jesus doesn't say, think this, believe this, and you will live, feel this. He says, do this. He's saying that loving the Lord and loving others needs to be acted upon. And in saying this, he displays that our faith needs to be an active one. The Gospels and the rest of the New Testament were originally written in Greek at the time. And since then, the Bible has been translated hundreds of times to the benefit of everyone. However, the saying lost in translation can come into play when different languages and different versions come in over the years. And sometimes some meaning within the Bible can be lost through the language changes and through those translations. But the original Greek for this passage, the times where Jesus says do, the original Greek says be doing. So instead of do this and you will live, he says be doing this and you shall be living. And then also, rather than go and do likewise, the original words are be going and you will be doing likewise. Might be a bit hard to read or to hear. It might sound a little bit like Yoda, doesn't it? It might seem as an insignificant difference. However, to be called to do something can imply that whatever you're going to do is a one-off thing, to consciously act on something specific. So in the context of this passage, to go and do likewise in the act of loving your neighbour perhaps implies that you could do that action once or possibly twice, tick that box and move on. Whereas to be doing the action of loving your neighbour, that implies more a state of being than one specific deed. Jesus' words, implications, and own life appear to be telling us not what we need to be living a faith, but actually that it needs to be active. He's saying that we need to be living out an active faith. And those two words, they have to come together, active and faith. So about 9 years ago, before I started training for ministry, I visited a few Baptist colleges to discern what would be the right fit for me. And one college I visited, they offered either a church-based pathway route or a college-based one. And this was where you could either spend 3 years based in a church as a minister in training and then travel to the college a couple of days a week to do the theology degree and the ministerial formation, or to spend 3 years living at the college doing the training with some opportunities to do shorter church placements. And both of those have a lot of value in of themselves, but I felt particularly drawn towards the church-based option. As for me, it felt more like a kind of apprenticeship where I could learn whilst doing the vocation. So I had an interview with the college principal. I won't name the Baptist college. And he said, because I was only 22 at the time, you can now guess my age if you didn't know it already, I could only do the college-based route, not the church one. After that, I then went and visited Northern Baptist College, and the tutor took me round and explained the college and the course to me. And when explaining the positives of the college in relation to some of the others, he explained that this college had everyone only doing the church-based route, and that the BA course was called contextual theology, meaning that for every student there, the continual aim was to ensure that everything that was being learnt in the classroom was able to be applied directly to the church placements that students were based in. And that what we were learning and doing in our placements could then also be applied to what we were learning in the classroom. So I kind of, at the time, took the term contextual theology quite lightly and thought it was simply a more elaborate name for a normal theology degree. Just whack that word on the front and it sounds a bit fancier. However, over those 3 years of training, I did end up at Northern Baptist, by the way. Over those 3 years of training there, the contextual elements, the way that that was described to me, that was completely true. Every module I undertook, every session I attended, every essay I tackled was about asking the question of what does this mean to me in my context? And much of what I learned through working as a minister in training at a church in Haworth in Yorkshire at the same time, I was able to then bring to the college. So another term for this contextual theology, this kind of theology, is doing theology, practical theology. And we were taught at college that all theology should be contextual, meaning we should always be trying to bring it into our own settings that we find ourselves in, that we should always be striving to do theology. And this word theology, it's a bit of a funny word, isn't it? Well, directly translated, it means the study of God. It simply means to learn about God. So to do theology means learning about God through our actions, through what we do. So to just go back to the passage that Richard read, the person who is talking with Jesus is described as an expert in the law. This meant that this man had studied the Torah, which was the first 5 books in the Old Testament, and various laws within them. In the New Testament, particularly the Gospels, in those times, scribes were referred to as lawyers. And these lawyers, they were experts in this sacred Mosaic law that was, in theory, the sole legislation in civic and religious matters that governed the Jewish people. And many scribes became interpreters of the law as members of the Sanhedrin, which was the highest legal and administrative body that governed Jewish life. And so this expert in the law was the equivalent of our modern day lawyers. There's a guy called Julian Maugham, I can't pronounce the name properly. He is a British barrister. He was a taxation lawyer, but then he founded the Good Law Project. I don't know if anyone's heard of him at all. The Good Law Project is a non-profit campaign organisation that aims to use the law to protect the interests of the public, and he's doing a lot of good work. I've been listening to this guy's recent book, and early on in it, he explains how training to be a lawyer entails learning UK laws inside and out, so that this knowledge can be used to defend any clients. And he said that you come to understand that the brutal purpose of studying law is simply that you should know the law and use it as a weapon, but not to engage with the law, not to question it, not to grapple with it, just to learn it, and to use it in court to give the right answers. So this expert of the law in our accounts in the New Testament who speaks to Jesus, he was probably similar. He knew the teachings of the Torah. He could give all the right answers, and he does so with Jesus as we read. And we don't know about his relationship with God, but we do know that he's not sure how to engage with what he's studied, how to live it out, how to act on it. A really valuable and integral part of having a faith in God is to read the Bible, to pray with and to God, to spend time nurturing our relationship in quiet reflection. However, I know for me that a lot of times that I've learned most about God isn't just when I've read the Bible on its own in isolation, or just when I've prayed lots. But the times when I've learned most about God are either through the things I've done or the things that have been done by others that have revealed God even more to me. The times I've felt closer to God is when I've engaged with or experienced the truth of Jesus' teachings, when they go hand in hand with reading the Bible. When I've been supported by people who are showing God's love to me, when I see the fruits of the Spirit being lived out, the times when I feel I'm experiencing the fullness of life that Jesus says that he came to bring. Like the expert of the law, we can read the Bible through and through. We can give lots of answers about faith because we've studied hard. But Jesus doesn't just want us to do the studying. Jesus wants us, tells the expert of the law, and in turn us, to have an active faith. He says, to be doing, and you shall be living. And he says, go and be doing likewise. And Morrissey is a community theologian and has done a lot of work on enabling people to live out their faith in the community. She's written a number of great books, and one brilliant book in the 90s that she wrote was called Beyond the Good Samaritan. And within it, she says these words: the fact is, we do not develop a lively and informed faith by achieving an intellectual understanding of the doctrinal formulations of our particular version of Christianity, but rather through the risk of faith in action. We are called to be acting out our love for God and for others. And when we do so, and when others act it out in our lives as well, we are learning about God. We are doing theology. And in this passage, Jesus says to the expert of the law, be doing this and you shall be living. When we love God and when we love others through our actions, we are truly living. Does anyone recognise these words on the screen? Do they ring a vague bell for some people? If you haven't been to our church before, or if you haven't seen what is on the wall in the foyer as you walk through, this is our church's vision statement. It's been developed over a number of years, growing together by loving God, loving others, and serving our community, church without walls. This really emulates all that this time is about this morning, all that Jesus' words on the Good Samaritan are about, for us to be growing together by loving God, loving others, and serving our community, breaking down those walls and those barriers through our actions. So let's be living out that vision through our everyday actions. I'm just going to encourage you just to take a moment before our final song together, just a moment to reflect. Maybe to reflect on how God might be speaking to you this morning, about how to go and be doing likewise from this passage. Maybe to reflect on which neighbours God might be calling you to express this loving action towards. So just take that moment to pause and to reflect. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you speak to us in so many different ways. You speak to us through your word. You speak to us through our prayers. You speak to us through the Holy Spirit. And you also speak to us through our actions. Lord, may we not forget that crucial part that you call us to do. Those actions of loving others. To be continually asking the question of who is my neighbour? How can I be better loving my neighbour? What actions might God be calling me to live out with the people around me? How can I show God's love and not just declare God's love to people? Lord, may you challenge us individually and collectively in the week and months ahead in how we can be living out our faith. May you be speaking to us through our actions and through the actions of others. May we see you in all we do, in all we are. We thank you for your unending love for us and pray that we can be encouraged to share that through our actions with others. Amen.